Alright mga students, welcome back sa ating klase. Welcome back sa aking channel. Ipagpapatuloy natin ngayon ang Fundamental Principles of Taxation. So, nandito tayo sa part number 2. Pero ito ay taxation concepts and principles pa rin, ano? And for this session, pag-uusapan natin kung ano-ano ba yung mga classification of taxes, ano yung elements of a sound tax system, ano ba ang limitation ng Estado with regards doon sa kanyang power to tax. Meron kasi tayong tinatawag na mga inherent limitations at yung constitutional limitation. So pag-uusapan natin yan ngayon. And of course, we will also be dealing with Situs of Taxation. At saka, in terms of other impositions or yung mga terminologies, papaano natin ito kino-compare sa term na tax. So, yun yung ating pag-uusapan sa ngayon. Pero, tandaan lang ninyo, ito yung ating learning instruction. You have to study the assigned topics and as much as possible, you have to research further kung medyo bitin ka sa ating discussion and cross-reference the topics with other materials that you have or you may see online or baka meron kayong mga reference, may mga kakilala kayo na may mga libro, so better na i-cross-reference ninyo ito. And meron tayong gagawin doon sa canvas ninyo. I made it available. That is an activity for you to do because that is a graded activity. Now, ito yung ating mga topics for the week or for this meeting. Pag-usapan na natin sa ngayon yung classification of taxes. Now, marami tayo ditong mga criteria or category from letter A to F. Unahin na muna natin yung sa classification as to scope and taxing authority. Meron kasi tayong tinatawag na national versus local taxes. Pag sinabi nating national, o kagaya ng makikita ninyo dito sa inyong file, ito yung mga buwis na ini-impose or ipinapataw ng national government because it is stated in our tax code or yung tinatawag natin na NIRC. Etong NIRC, ang ibig dito sabihin is the National Internal Revenue Code. So, meron tayong batas patungkol dyan, yung tax code natin. And it is collected sa pamamagitan ng Bureau of Internal Revenue or the BIR. Yun nga lang, meron pang ibang mga national government agencies na posible or maaari magkolekta ng buwis in behalf of the national government. So, ang example nitong mga national taxes is yung ating income taxes, estate tax, donor's tax, value-added tax, documentary stamp tax or DST, and other percentage taxes. Pag local taxes, ito yung mga impositions ng local government unit, ng LGU. Kagaya ng mga real estate tax at saka mga professional tax receipts. So that is as to scope and taxing authority. National versus local. Samantalang, as to subject matter or object, sino ba yung binubuwisan? Meron tayong tatlong category. Merong personal, poll or capitation. Iisa lang ang ibig sabihin diyan. May mga iba't ibang terms lang And then you have your property tax and then the excise tax. When we are talking of this first category, yung personal, poll or capitation, yung buwis na ito ay pinapataw sa mga individuals, sa mga tao, regardless kung citizen ka or hindi. Now, etong citizen or not, pag-uusapan natin ito later on sa mga susunod na linggo. And syempre, yung pagpapataw nito is within the bounds of the territory, within the jurisdiction of the state. Remember yung definition natin sa taxation on part 1 of our session. Without regard, okay? Sabi dito, without regard to their property or occupation. So, basta ito ay mga buwis na pinapataw sa tao, At yung example natin ay yung cedula or the community tax na nakukuha natin sa mga munisipyo or sa mga syudad, sa mga opisina ng gobyerno na ito. Now, pag sinabi naman nating property, ito ay buwis na ipinapataw doon sa mga ari-arian sa property. Mapa-real man ito or personal. Kagaya nung real estate tax or the real property tax. Ang iba, ang tawag dito, kung familiar kayo sa term na amilyar. Ito yung example ng property tax. Kapag wala dyan sa definition ng dalawa, kung hindi yan personal or hindi yan property, meron pang isa at ang tinatawag natin dyan ay excise tax. Pag hindi nagpo-fall doon sa dalawang category, excise tax yan. Ang tax na ito ay for the exercise of certain rights and privileges. Okay? So, ang example pa rin natin dito ay income tax, estate tax, or donor's tax. Now, take note lang kasi yung excise tax, it may also refer doon sa sin tax na ina-apply doon sa mga non-essential goods like yung mga sigarilyo at saka mga alak. So, yun din kasi yung tawag natin doon. Sin tax or excise tax, yung binubuwis doon sa mga sigarilyo at alak. At iba pang mga non-essential goods. Okay, now, sa letter C naman, as to who bears the burden, meron tayong tinatawag na direct taxes at saka indirect taxes. Pag sinabi nating direct taxes, ito ay dinib-demand, okay? Sinisingil doon sa tao at hindi niya ito pwedeng ipasa sa iba. Kagaya ng inyong mga personal taxes, yung mga income taxes ninyo, So, ikaw yung magbabayad doon, so liable ka to pay the tax due. Samantalang, pag sinabi naman natin na indirect tax, okay, it is demanded from one person, pero it can be shifted upon or it can be passed to another taxpayer. At yung pinaka-common nito ay yung ating value-added tax. So, halimbawa, ikaw ay isang entrepreneur. So, nagbebenta ka at VAT registered ang iyong business. So, kailangan mong magpataw ng 12% VAT doon sa iyong mga paninda. Pero, pinapasa mo kasi ito sa iyong mga consumer, sa mga buyers. So, sila ang nakakatanggap talaga. Sila yung nagbabayad ng buwis na yon. So, it can be shifted from one taxpayer to another. So, that is what we call indirect tax. Now, proceed tayo dito sa letter D. Classification ng tax as to determination of amount. Meron tayong specific and then ad valorem. Meron akong highlight dito sa kanilang definition. Pag sinabi nating mga specific tax, fix siya in terms of amount, peso value. Samantalang pag ad valorem, fix siya in terms of proportion or your percentage. So, halimbawa, sa mga sigarilyo, meron kasi tayong mga excise taxes na every year nagbabago. So, kunwari sa isang kaha ng sigarilyo, ang pinapataw na buwis ay 10 piso. Example lang ang tawag natin doon ay specific tax. So, sa kada kaha. Pero, yung fixed proportion, percentage. So, kaya nga yung value-added tax, that is an example of ad valorem. Kasi 12% naka-fix siya. Okay, so yun yung pinaka-common na example. Now, pag as to purpose, meron kasi tayong primary fiscal or revenue at saka yung secondary, regulatory, special or sumptuary. At familiar naman na kayo dito because if you go back doon sa ating part 1 ng chapter 1 na ito, we discussed this in terms of purpose of taxation. Pag primary fiscal or revenue, yung buwis na yon, it is imposed for the general purpose of the government, for the collection of taxes, para makapag-raise ng revenue, para sa paggamit, okay, for the necessary expenses of governance. Samantalang pag secondary, regulatory, special, or sumptuary, this is for regulatory purposes, like to achieve some social or economic ends. So, ang example na pwede natin gamitin dito is yung mga tariff and certain duties on imports. Now, panghuling category, as to graduation or in terms of the rate, meron tayong proportional, meron tayong progressive or graduated, at meron tayong regressive. Pag sinabi nating proportional, yung tax based on a fixed percentage. Kagaya ng example natin sa ad valorem, fixed proportion. So, example ulit natin is the value-added tax. Naka-proportion, kaya siya tinawag na proportional. Pag sinabi nating progressive or graduated, meron niyang bracketing. Okay? Pag nandito ka sa bracket na ito, ganito yung buwis mo. Samantalang, pag further ka dyan sa brackets na yan, farther down the line, mas lalaki ang iyong buwis na babayaran. At ang pinaka-common example dito ay yung individual income tax. Meron niyang tax table na magkano ba dapat ang babayaran mo depende sa sahod na kinikita mo. Okay? Yung tax rate increases as the tax base or bracket increases. Ang kabaligtaran yan is yung regressive. Okay? Pag regressive, yung tax rate bumababa kapag lumalaki yung tax base mo or yung bracket mo. So, yung opposite nitong progressive. Okay? So, yan yung ating mga classification ng taxes. Now, pag-usapan naman natin ngayon yung elements of sound tax system. Kasi meron tayong tinatawag na fiscal adequacy, yung theoretical justice or equity. Nabanggit ko na rin ito sa chapter 1, part 1, yung ability to pay principle. At saka yung pangatlo, yung administrative feasibility. Pagdating sa fiscal adequacy, ang sinasabi kasi dito, yung sources ng buwis ay dapat sapat. It should be adequate. Hindi dapat siya nagkukulang para tustusan ang mga pangangailangan ng gobyerno. So, dapat adequate. Para syempre masustain yung mga level of activities ng government, kailangan merong pantustos yun at kinakailangang sapat yon. Kasi pag nagkulang yon, maapektuhan yung operations ng government at hindi maipoprovide yung mga necessary activities na ginagawa for the public purpose. Now, ang theoretical justice or equity or your ability to pay principle, yung tax burden should be proportionate. No? Mas higher yung ability to pay mo o mas malaki yung buwis, yung contribution mo sa pagbabayad ng buwis. Yun lang yung sinasabi nito. So please go back to my lecture 1 kasi meron akong example doon. Now, yung administrative feasibility, and let me read it to you, the tax laws must be capable of effective and efficient enforcement. Yung tax system should be as simple as possible. So, dapat simple lang, yung batas na ito, yung mga batas sa pagbubuwis. At dapat effective ito and efficient in terms of enforcement sa pagpapatupad nitong mga batas sa pagbubuwis. Pero dapat simple, hindi dapat sa komplikado. Kasi kapag komplikado, maraming pwedeng mangyari and it can be subject to different interpretations. So these are the elements of a sound tax system. Once again, fiscal adequacy, theoretical justice, and third, administrative feasibility. Okay? Now, how about the limitations on the state's power to tax? Meron kasi tayong inherent and the constitutional limitation. Pero sa ngayon, pag-usapan muna natin itong inherent limitations. Ano-ano ba itong inherent limitation na ito? Now, if you remember, when we said inherent, ito ay likas, ito ay natural. So, itong mga limitations na ito, this exists kahit na walang express constitutional provision. Now, for number 1 or for letter A, the purpose must be public in nature or governmental yung purpose. Ang sinasabi kasi dito, dapat walang tax law na ini-enact or ipinapatupad to raise revenue for private purposes. Kasi ang objective ng buwis is para sa kapakinabangan din ng general public at hindi yung mga select individuals or group of individuals. Now, in considering whether or not the purpose is private or public, you have to identify it or you have to analyze it through this criteria. Etong 1, 2, 3, is it for the support of the government? Kung it is for the support of the government, and that is public. Pangalawa, for some of the recognized objects of government. If the answer is yes, and that is public purpose. Now, yung pangatlo, is it to promote the welfare of the community? Kasi if the answer is yes, and the purpose is public. Pag the answer is no, dito sa tatlo na ito, it serves the private purpose. And we always have to remember that it is for the government purpose dapat. Public ang nakikinabang ng buwis na binabayaran ng public din. Okay? Ang sinasabi dito, the benefit received by private individuals are only incidental. Siyempre, yung mga private individuals, it is part of the public. So, siyempre, kung nakikinabang sila, it's because it is incidental. Pero hindi dapat primary. Now, pakibasa nitong part na ito, kasi meron din akong dinagdag dyan. In terms of determining whether the purpose is private or public, it rests with the Congress to tackle on it, to decide whether the purpose is for private or public use. Now, meron pa tayong dalawang inherent limitations, Yung pangalawa is the prohibition against delegation of the power to tax. And nabanggit ko na rin ito sa Chapter 1, Lecture 1. Pakibasa na lang nito or pakibalikan. Ganon din yung territorial limitations. And I hope by now naintindihan ninyo kung anong ibig sabihin yan. Available din yan sa part 1 na file natin. Sa constitutional limitations, actually napakadami nito. Ang i-discuss ko muna sa inyo sa ngayon ay itong unang tatlo. Yung due process of law, yung equal protection of laws, and then yung uniformity rule. The rest, okay, at meron akong tagging dito, I will leave it to you as an assignment to research on your own and explain ano itong mga constitutional limitations na ito. Kasi basahin ko lang meron pa tayong mga constitutional limitations on the prohibition against imprisonment for non-payment of poll tax, against impairment of obligation of contracts, against infringement of religious freedom, and so on and so forth. Okay? So this is a group activity. Meron akong inassign na groupings. So you have to check on your canvas para malaman ninyo kung alin dito yung assignment ninyo at kailangang ipasa sa akin. Okay? But sa ngayon, pag-usapan natin yung tatlong constitutional limitations na ito. Let's begin with the due process of law. Ang tawag din dito is the right to notice and hearing. Siguro familiar na yung iba sa inyo pag sinabi nating due process. Kapag sinabi kasing due process, dapat napapakinggan ka, nalalaman kung ano yung panig mo. Now, in terms of taxation, the power to tax must be fair. Okay? Ito yung mga terms, key terms, fair or just. At hindi siya harsh, oppressive, or confiscatory. So, dapat merong due process kahit na ang pinag-uusapan natin is the power to tax. Hindi pwedeng kinukuha na lang yung mga properties mo kasi confiscatory in nature yung ating power to tax. Hindi pwedeng ganoon. Now, yung equal protection of law, ang sinasabi nito, persons or group of persons under the same circumstances, or similar conditions, they should be treated alike. So, dapat pare-parehas yung pagtatrato sa kanila. In terms of the privileges na binibigay sa kanila at saka yung mga liabilities nila sa pagbabayad ng buwis. Okay? Take note, persons under similar circumstances and conditions. So, hindi ibig sabihin niya na kung ganito yung trato sa akin, dapat ganyan yung trato sa lahat. You have to consider, are we similar in terms of circumstances and conditions? Kasi kung magkakaparehas yung ating circumstansya, edi dapat ganun din yung application ng mga batas. Application ng pagbubuwis at saka yung mga pagbabayad ng buwis. Pero kung magkaiba tayo ng circumstances, hindi mag-a-apply yung equal protection of law. Okay? Now, uniformity rule and equity and taxation. Ang sinasabi naman nito, and let me read it to you, there should be uniform application and operation without discrimination. So, dapat wala itong pinapanigan. Walang dinidiscriminate of the tax in every place and where the subject of the tax is found, subject to reasonable classification. And when we are talking of uniformity rule, meron tayong sinasabi na progressive system of taxation versus your regressive system of taxation. Pag sinasabi kasi nating progressive system of taxation, yung tax laws, ang ine-emphasize niyan is on the direct taxes rather the indirect taxes. Ang emphasis, direct taxes as compared to indirect taxes. Samantalang, pagdating sa regressive system, at dapat versus yan, hindi equal, ang emphasis naman ng mga tax laws is on the indirect taxes instead na yung direct taxes. So, they are the exact opposite. So, these are the constitutional limitations. Pero of course, hindi lamang yan. Yun nga lang, I will leave this to you as an assignment. Now, how about the Situs of Taxation? Pag sinabi nating Situs, baka yung iba, Situs, pero kung ano man yung basa nyo dyan, Situs or Situs, ang ibig lang sabihin nito, that is the place of taxation. Yung lugar. So, it is the state, this one, or political unit that has jurisdiction para magpataw ng buwis. Now, the following factors should be considered in determining the situs of taxation. Yung subject matter, sino yung bubuwisan? Ito ba ay tao? Ito ba ay ari-arian or activity? Anong klase yung tax na ito? Yung citizenship ng taxpayer, kung saan siya nakatira, ano yung source ng kanyang income, and then yung place of excise, business, or occupation being taxed. Okay? O, pag tinanong kayo, ano yung Situs of Taxation? That is the place of taxation. Okay. Now, pag-usapan natin yung tax as compared sa mga other impositions or other terminologies. And these are not really the same as tax. Okay, pag-usapan natin yung toll. Pag sinabi kasi nating toll, that is a sum of money imposed for the use of, ang pinaka-common dito ay mga use of road, use of bridges, or other public infrastructure. So, dahil nakikinabang ka, dahil gumagamit ka ng kalsada, you have to pay for a toll. Kaya nga, very common dito, lalong-lalo na yung mga may sasakyan, nagagawi kung saan-saan, napunta ka ng NLEX, napunta ka ng SLEX, North or South, meron tayong toll fee na binabayaran. So, that is an example. Pag sinabi naman nating penalty, that is an imposition kasi meron kang violation. Okay? Napipinalize ka, Violation of law or acts deemed injurious. So, kunwari, meron kang pinagkakautangan, sabihin na natin na isang lending institution, so hindi mo nababayaran yon, it becomes an injury para doon sa parte na pinagkakautangan mo, so nagkakaroon sila ng mga penalty, nagbibigay sila ng penalty sa iyo. Pag special assessment naman, at nandito na tayo sa letter C, ang special assessment, that is an enforced proportional contribution. Ang kinaibahan nito sa buwis kasi yung special assessment ay applicable lamang sa lupa from owners of lands for special benefit resulting from public improvements. Okay? The purpose of which is to finance such improvement and only accrues to the owners thereof, who will then pay the assessment. So pag special assessment, merong imposition because of the land. Okay? Yun yung pinaka unique niya as compared to the other impositions, or especially sa tax. Pag buwis kasi, hindi lang naman yan specific doon sa lote, meron kang person and other excise taxes. Now, yung revenue, pag sinabi kasi nating revenue as compared doon sa tax, pag revenue, it refers to all of the funds that the government collects, kung saan nakapabilang yung tax. Meron pa namang ibang mga impositions, may mga ibang mga charges na nakokolekta yung gobyerno. So, yung pag pinagsama natin yung lahat, that is called the revenue, whether from tax or any other sources. Now, how about subsidy? Ang subsidy, that this is an aid or grant na binibigay ng gobyerno, either to an individual or a private commercial enterprise, kung saan ang benefit na ito is for the public. So, naririnig na ninyo yung mga subsidy na term. Okay, minsan may natatanggap yung private establishment na subsidy from the government. So, may natatanggap sila na pera, may grant or may ayuda na natatanggap coming from the government. So, that is a subsidy. Now, meron pa tayong permit or license fee. At ito, usually maririnig ninyo kapag mga renewal ng mga business licenses. Yung mga establishmento at the beginning of the year, kailangan na mag-renew ng lisensya, na business permit. So, yun yung example natin dito. Because when we are talking of this term, it is imposed under the police power for purposes of regulation. Okay? So, license fee, permit. So, halimbawa, business registration, mapa establishment, or sabihin na natin, nag-register ka ng sasakyan mo sa LTO, may mga permits na binabayaran pa. Debt. Ang debt, utang, That is an amount owed to a person by reason of a prior arrangement or a contract. So, debt is an utang. Ang custom duties naman, actually, pag sinabi nating tariff and custom duties, synonymously nagagamit ito. Kasi meron tayong tinatawag na tariff and customs code at nagagamit yan interchangeably. Pag sinabi kasi nating custom duties, these are taxes imposed on goods exported from or imported to the country. Pag may mga merchandise na nanggagaling sa ibang bansa, merong mga custom duties yan. Okay? Na ipinapataw doon other than the taxes or other impositions. Okay? Pag tariff, it may be used in one of the following. It's either a book of rates drawn usually in alphabetical order containing the names of several kinds of merchandise with the corresponding duties to be paid for the same. So ito ay isang listahan ng mga merchandise, alphabetical order, at nakalagay doon kung ito yung mga merchandise na ito, magkano yung applicable na tariff dyan. Magkano yung custom duties. Next, it is the duties payable on goods imported or exported. Kaya kung makikita ninyo, halos ganun din naman yung definition ng custom duties. And last, it is a system of principles of imposing duties on the importation or exportation of goods. So, ganun na naman, importation or exportation of goods, and maire-relate na naman natin ito sa custom duties. Okay? So, I hope you learned something from me today. Hanggang dito muna yung pag-uusapan natin on the second part ng Fundamental Principles of Taxation. So, I will see you around the next meeting para i-discuss yung the rest or the remaining topics under Chapter 1 or Fundamental Principles of Taxation. Now, if you have any questions or kung masyado kayong nabibilisan sa akin, o pwede nyo naman i-comment dito, tanungin ako, or i-message nyo ako sa ating official na application which is the Canvas. Okay? So, until next time, bye-bye.